Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to COD Zombies HQ. For the first time ever, according to leakers, it seems like Cold War and Cold War Zombies may receive consistent new DLC content throughout 6 new Year 2 seasons throughout 2021 and 2022. So in this video, we're going over what leakers are saying about Year 2 Black Ops Cold War, cover what Treyarch has done in their past games in regards to Year 2 support, then finish up with possibly what kind of zombies content we can expect Treyarch to release here for Black Ops Cold War throughout its Year 2 DLC cycle. So the best place to start is to cover where the idea of a Year 2 DLC cycle here in Cold War is coming from. Well, the first time we heard about this was from well-known leaker Tom Henderson, who said in a tweet, "I was told recently that Black Ops Cold War will likely be the most supported Call of Duty title after its cycle has ended, as its post-launch revenue is exceeding expectations." So because the post-launch revenue surrounding Black Ops Cold War has been much better than both Activision and Treyarch had originally expected, Tom is giving us the indication that Activision has given Treyarch the green light to continue development of new Cold War content beyond its original quote-unquote cycle, which is considered the first year after its release, seasons 1 through 6, until the launch of the next Call of Duty game in November of this year, where normally that cycle is ended and the cycle for the new game begins. That will apparently be different this time around. Though while this tweet does give us an indication that Treyarch will continue development on DLC for Call of Duty beyond Season 6, we really don't get an idea of what specifically they plan on adding into the game. We do, however, get a little bit more information about what they're planning due to a confirmed insider source that's associated with noted leaker and the leakers behind this account called Vanguard Intel over on Twitter, where they have a very credible source that has stated the following about what kind of content we expect to see, where they specifically say that Cold War is likely to get another 6 seasons of content after Season 6, according to their source. So from the Tom Henderson tweet, we can surmise the general, yes, there will be more post-launch support for Cold War, and from the insider source, we can surmise that that content will take the form of 6 more seasons of content that will be added into Black Ops Cold War throughout 2021 and 2022. But then that brings up the question why Activision would allow Treyarch to continue creating content for the old Call of Duty in the first place. But when we look at it, we can kind of understand the reason why. First off, in relating to zombies, Treyarch kind of does have a history of updating their past games past the original cycle, especially when it comes to the Zombies mode. Now, we didn't see any of that in their last game, Black Ops 4, largely due to fan reception of that game and the fact that the regular 3-year cycle for Call of Duty games cycling between Sledgehammer, Infinity Ward, and Treyarch had been broken, and they were forced to work on this game, Cold War, a year earlier than expected. But that wasn't the case in the game before that, Black Ops 3 Zombies, where they supported the Zombies mode through 2 major updates after the game's actual cycle was completed. Now, of course, everybody knows and remembers the release of Zombies Chronicles in the summer of Black Ops 3 Year 2, but not a lot of people remember the actual first big update we got to Zombies before Chronicles, and that was the Newton's Cookbook feature update that released into the game months before Chronicles was even announced. So Treyarch does have a history of supporting their games past the original cycle in the past, but why would Activision allow them to do this? But that starts to make sense when you imagine how the gaming world will look like later this year in late 2021 and of course going into next year, where unlike this year and even its past game, COD now has significant competition from its competitors in the form of both Battlefield 2042 and Halo Infinite. That combined with the fact that the COD title coming out this year, Call of Duty Vanguard, isn't one of those staple COD franchises, a Modern Warfare or a Black Ops, it seems to me very likely that Activision has a lot less confidence that that title will carry the Call of Duty brand on its own throughout the year until the next Infinity Ward game, likely Modern Warfare 2, will be released in late 2022. So in an effort to keep as much players coming back to COD as possible, we can kind of understand from Treyarch's and Activision's perspective why they would keep developing DLC for Cold War. So now that we've gone over what the leakers originally said about why Activision and Treyarch would be developing a year 2 for Cold War, let's talk about specifically what kinds of content we as Zombies players could expect in a year 2 of Black Ops Cold War. So assuming that Vanguard Intel's insider source is correct and that Treyarch will be releasing 6 more seasons of content for Cold War, I would say that it being year 2, we're likely to get something new for the Zombies mode at the start of every season, and it's less likely that Zombies will be getting new content at the start of new season and at the start of every halfway point between the seasons, quote, reloaded. Now the type of content that we're likely to see is limited to the following. At the kind of less interesting but unfortunately likely scale is that Treyarch will continue to release quote-unquote new maps for their Outbreak mode. Now the new maps that we've gotten for the Outbreak mode so far in year 1 have largely been repurposed from the cancelled Warzone map that Treyarch has been grabbing chunks out of and making them their own Outbreak maps. But within the game files, players have discovered that Treyarch has seemingly been working on porting regular Fireteam maps from multiplayer into the Outbreak game mode. So maybe instead of sourcing the new map locations from the cancelled Warzone map, they'll start sourcing them from multiplayer's Fireteam. Which, to be honest with you, is kind of boring. I mean, there's gonna be so many kind of generic maps in the Outbreak mode to begin with, you're just gonna cycle through them with no particular order or rhyme or reason. Now, if they wanted to spice things up, specifically within the Outbreak mode, I think it could come in 2 forms. Remember that Treyarch said that Outbreak is likely to continue in their next main series Call of Duty game, so I would imagine that they're still using Cold War as a bit of a testing ground to determine what form that next generation of the Outbreak mode will take. Something we haven't seen before and something that's been much talked about since the first leaks about this game have released is a dedicated original Zombies map for the Outbreak game mode. If you guys remember, back near the launch of this game, a very credible leak that has got a lot right about Zombies content that would be coming to this game also managed to specifically mention the map Tranzit, and that it won't be there at launch. This has left a lot of players to imagine that Tranzit might be added into some kind of future content coming to the game, perhaps as part of a Zombies Chronicles 2 expansion, which deserves its own video outright, with many players believing that if Tranzit was to make a return here in Cold War, it would come in the form of its own Outbreak map. Which does kind of tick all the boxes of what Outbreak originally is. You take away some of the fog and the denizens, the original Black Ops 2 Tranzit can easily transform into an Outbreak map here in Cold War. And the next area of content that I think we're all hoping to see, that Treyarch really hasn't doubled down on yet, is in the form of new game modes. Now, with the recent release of Undead Siege in COD Mobile, which combines Outbreak type features with a pseudo tower defense game mode using upgradable sentry turrets, if that mode turns out to be very successful, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Treyarch create their own version of Undead Siege here in Cold War using Outbreak as a base. Furthermore, while new game modes in this game have been limited to the Cranked game mode as well as the Jingle Hells game mode back in December, players have constantly been asking for more creative new game modes to be added. Of course, the most requested of those game modes is the Grief mode, which we could possibly finally see here in a COD Zombies game the first time since Black Ops 2, to hopefully bring players back to the mode during its year 2 content updates. But obviously the most exciting possibility when it comes to new Zombies content for year 2 would be the release of more traditional round-based maps for the Zombies mode. With the release of the next round-based map currently scheduled likely to release either in the middle of Season 5 or at the start of Season 6, That means that by the time all is said and done, we'll only have 4 round-based maps for this game, the least we've had since the original World at War. The one way Treyarch could really correct this lack of regular round-based content is by continuing development of new maps throughout the Year 2 DLC season. We're likely to see 3 round-based maps through the 6 seasons of Year 1, so perhaps we might see the same 3 more round-based maps released through the 6 seasons of Year number 2. Now, the absolute best thing as a Zombies player, I think, about continued support for Cold War and Cold War Zombies in Year 2 is that it would mean that we would be getting new content for 2 separate Zombies games consistently at the same time. Because remember, this year, Call of Duty 2021 Vanguard is releasing along with its own Zombies mode, of which we made a whole video discussing leaked details. You can find it linked down in the description or via card on your top right if you want to learn more, which means that we'll be getting DLC Zombies content for Vanguard and Cold War at the same time, which should help alleviate some of the major content droughts we've seen here in Cold War Zombies between the release of the game and the release of DLC 1 Firebase Z, as well as the huge drought between the original release of Outbreak in early February and the release here of Mauer der Toten DLC 3 in mid-July. The breaks between those releases were brutal for this game. The content they released in between them was not significant enough to keep people interested, but if there was a whole nother game adding Zombies content in between those lulls, then the community is going to have a lot to do, a lot to talk about, and a lot of new content to play in between those drought periods. If you guys have ever tuned into one of those Activision investor calls where they usually discuss new Call of Duty projects in their infancy, pitching to their shareholders, of which they're obviously having a tough time right now for very good reasons, but they always seem to emphasize one statistic, and that is the concept of MAUs, monthly active users within their games. In the coming year where COD Vanguard's going to have to compete with the likes of Battlefield 2042 and Halo Infinite for their player bases for those MAUs, it does seem to me that relying on their fallback option, their known quantity, that being Black Ops Cold War, and its already large install and player base is probably a good financial move on their part. But that wraps up this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider leaving a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. I would love to hear down in the comments if they do decide to do a Year 2 Black Ops Cold War, what would you like to see specifically related to the Zombies mode? For me personally, it's kind of a tie between the Grief mode, which will offer zombies much more replayability, a new Outbreak kind of tower defense game mode. I personally am a big fan of those action combined with tower defense game modes, games like Orcs Must Die and things like that I really enjoy. I'd love to see a zombies version of it. And lastly, of course, I would love to see more round-based maps here in Cold War. The ones we've gotten have gotten better and better. I'd love to see more depth of Easter eggs within those maps, but any or combination of those 3 would be my personal highlights. But I would love to know what you guys specifically want. But again, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you with another Zombies news video tomorrow. Peace.